Welcome to Chasing a Murder, guys, and happy Mother's Day. This will be uploaded after Mother's Day, but I love you guys. Don't forget now, we are on part 176 of Life Beyond the Grave. JJ VALLOW wakes up Sunday morning. It seems just another day for him. He's sitting on a couch with his red pajamas, drinking his breakfast drink. If you were to refer to only this photo, you would think that he was just being spoiled and treated like a normal child. Nothing out of the ordinary here. We don't see JJ acting rambunctious or climbing cabinets either. Sadly, when we look at this picture, looks are deceiving. What you're looking at is not the truth of what it is. This is a portrait that Lori painted, that everyone believed existed. But her secrets were out in the open, in plain sight, but they were too blind to see the truth. Around this time, Melanie Gibb, David Warwick are still upstairs in JJ's room. They may be asleep or just waking up. During this time, at some point this morning, Lori Vallow gets on her computer and searches possession. Why? Many people believe that she's searching the symptoms of being possessed by a demon or dark entity. Looking for these details that she knows that Melanie Gibb or others might want to know about. It seems that Lori was not certain of what possession is. This is important to note. Her looking this up gives her the opportunity to be more educated into explaining why JJ is a zombie. Perhaps she wants Melanie and David to be witnesses as well. If you think about it, the people within her circle will notice something strange. Her kids aren't around for what, a month, 2 months, 3 months? They're going to ask questions. Are they going to be somebody to worry about for her and Chad? Lori planned to be an empty nester at no choice of her children. Lori, a ticking time bomb, and it's down to the very last seconds. She couldn't be this mother she told people she was. We know how hard it was for Lori being a mother to her children. She had given us that clue multiple times. If Lori was tired of her children, why not just give them to family members or even friends? Based off the evidence that we know today, she had no concern for the children. Her welfare was for herself. Lori needed those checks that the kids were drawing in off of 2 of her dead husbands. If they were in someone else's care, she wouldn't get those checks. If they were gone, she wouldn't get those checks. Also, there's a second idea that perhaps she didn't want to tell anybody that she failed as a mother. This would ruin her reputation of being this great mom that everybody talks about. And then finally, we know that it's most likely part of her narcissistic personality. Truth is Lori likes the world to be seen as she creates it. I think the creepiest and craziest part to the story is how she would interact with the children and family members, even the ones that were planning these murders with her, as if it was a normal life. They played video games together, Guitar Hero, sang karaoke. This is probably one of the coldest killers that I've ever had to tell a story about. How could she be this loving mom at the same time planning their murder? JJ had no idea that Lori was sucking away his life through her ranking system, months and months and months. How do you know if Lori was delusional or if everything she was saying just was a way of manipulating the facts? One way you know this is the fact that she was the one on the computer searching possessed. She was the one that told Melanie Gibb and David Warwick she witnessed JJ climbing on the cabinets. knocking over the picture of Jesus and climbing on the very top of the cabinets, the ones just under the ceiling. It is certain that most likely that JJ did not do these things, and these were blatant lies that Lori made up to make people believe that he was a zombie. It was a cold, calculated manipulation strategy drawn up by Lori Vallow herself in order to make people to believe what she wanted them to believe and to make excuses as to why she couldn't take care of JJ. Lori didn't have a clue on how to raise children. She especially couldn't raise rebellious children. In fact, she was a terrible mom. It seemed that the reason for their rebellious nature is to have their mom to themselves. But it wasn't just Tylee and JJ that they were marking dark. She was actually focusing on a few other people, one of them being Brandon Boudreaux, her niece's, well, estranged husband, Melanie Boudreaux's children, Charles Vallow's sister, Kay Woodcock, her own brother, Adam Cox, and her own father, Barry. Shockingly, she had even focused on her sister, Summer, her greatest supporter through everything. Let's not forget that Tammy Daybell was also deemed dark and a zombie, but she doesn't have the same connections as, let's say, Lori's family. So what do most of them share in common? They all know Lori's translation. They all know that she had to live in children. They are witnesses to every part of her life before Charles, JJ, and Tylee Ryan are killed, and they are also doubtful witnesses to her translation. We've talked a lot about Lori, but what about Chad Daybell? Around this time, Chad Daybell is building up more confidence and support, and not the dark rankings, because he's always done that, but the fact that these dark rankings can lead to more. He seems to be more comfortable with the deaths happening around Lori. At first, he would push the ranking towards light until Lori seemed to be unhappy with that decision. If you remember in our series before now, that we've covered, Chad Daybell wrote in text where he had doubts about some of these people being ranked as low as Lori wanted them to be. But Lori, persistent and manipulative, coaxed Chad into bringing those numbers down, in which he gladly did. Chad is a grown man. He has a choice. He could have chosen to not do that, but that's not what he does. He is willing to sacrifice everything in his life, which isn't all that bad, for this one woman. Chad Daybell turns out to be a very selfish, manipulative, a greedy man, a man that could care less about anyone else but himself. Chad Daybell's children don't know it or don't see it, but their life is about to be turned upside down, destroyed. Their future, sad. Their friendships, the place they live, everything will be destroyed. And Chad had no regrets for sacrificing it all for the lust of his life. Over the weekend of September 22nd of 2019, Chad throws everything away, all for Lori. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but now 4 and working on 5 times, they have decided to take lives, saying that God had directed this, that they're over taking care of the zombies on Earth, and he is more than willing to be a participant. Not only are they predicting the deaths, and deaths are actually happening, they're talking to their spirits after they've been murdered. For some reason, after these guys murder people, they come back and they talk to them like it never happened and that they love her more than anything still. Her dead daughter, Tyler Ryan, is in 100% support for whatever Lori's doing, including the planning of the death of her own 7-year-old brother, JJ, and several other people. It takes a lot of guts to believe that when you tell people this story, you expect them to think that this is true, and that's something Lori will do in the future. Charles VALLOW was very concerned about Lori and her mental status, but the truth is, guys, either she's been always mentally disturbed or she's just plain evil. Charles VALLOW knew about Lori's background. Whether or not he admitted to it or he was easily manipulated, we don't know. What we noticed that several of the men that are in Lori's life, they will sacrifice everything to have her in it. Even though she's destructive, manipulating, a constant liar, and she doesn't seem to care about anyone else. Somehow, she's able to sink her hooks into these people, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to stay in her life. Now, interestingly, at some point, Alex Cox supposedly picks up JJ before Melanie and David come down from upstairs. But keep in mind that shortly after this, they're going to be meeting to look at a piece of property, and no one will see JJ there. So there's only one person that won't be there, and that's Lori VALLOW. So who is with JJ during this time? Lori VALLOW. We're all trying to figure out the time that they so evilly took this child's last breath. Now, we talked about the terrestrial buildings that they went and looked at. So the spiritual buildings, they believed that was on a piece of property next to the church in Salem. Remember, this isn't far from Chad Daybell's home. So, like I said, the timeline's kind of iffy, but there's a possibility that they went also this morning. Not just, maybe not Saturday. Maybe it was Sunday morning before they went and looked at the 79 acres. So we're dealing with allegorical messages, extremism, and that's mixed in a little bit with the LDS religion. David Warwick acted as though he was not interested in this property, that he didn't really want to go see it until Monday. But somehow, some way, he ends up going to look at this property, or they're getting ready to go look at this property Sunday, late morning. So this property is located at 1800 East and 190 North, according to Arnold. Again, that's Salem, Idaho, in 2019.
And did you end up doing that showing for Mr. Daybell?
Yes.
Who, if anyone, came with Mr. Daybell to that showing?
I picked him up at his home, and we met people there.
Who was there?
David Warwick and Melanie Gibb.
Was anybody else there?
Yes.
Who was that?
I didn't know at the time. I was introduced to this person. They said his name, and I didn't remember. But looking back, it was Alex.
Alex too. I apologize.
Alex Cox.
Thank you, sir. Was anybody else there?
No.
Now, we heard later that there was possibility that there was a guy named Keith involved with this property sale. Okay, and so I've not been able to have time to look into that. Now, let's jump back just a little bit before they go to this property and meet up. So Melanie and David come downstairs. They see Lori, but they don't see JJ. They're eating breakfast and they're kind of talking. At some point, David says he's interested in knowing where JJ is, so he asks Lori, where's JJ? David said that Lori was very dramatic that morning. She told David that JJ was acting like a zombie. He mentioned that in one trial testimony, but in the other, he didn't mention the word zombie. JJ was on top of the counters. He was climbing on top of the refrigerator, on top of the cabinets, and on top, very top of the top cabinets, which would be impossible. JJ even knocked over a picture of Jesus. David Warwick said that he looked around the kitchen, but he didn't see any scuff marks or any damage or any sign that JJ might have been behaving in that way. Lori then tells David that because JJ was acting like a zombie, she had Alex come and take him because she just couldn't handle it. Melanie Gibb at some point gets her hair done, and then they set out to take a look at this property. Arnold says that he picks Chad up at his house. They don't attend church that morning because they consider this church business, which is quite interesting. So this is part of the story that was not talked about very much, but should have been talked about. Who is over and who is involved with the church business of looking at properties surrounding Chad's? Chad and Arnold arrive at this piece of property and they wait. The first person to show up is Alex Cox, Lori's protective angel. Behind him is David Warwick, the visionary, and Melanie Gibb, one of the gatherers. Since 2015, Chad Daybell has claimed that this property was an important piece of land. Once it was Chad and Julie Rowe together, but once he met Lori, Julie was no longer in the picture. There were several other people that were within this little circle of people. David Warwick knows this. He knew that this area was supposedly going to be part of the second coming. Remember, Julie Rowe had visions of her husband riding on horseback with a gun protecting property. You had Chad Daybell, who seen lots of tents, white tents, surrounding a main piece of property. They referred to them as tent cities. As the world crashed down around them, their cities, these tents, would be safe. They would have people there that would be warriors for God. Their job was to protect the colony or tent cities. All the people that have been saving their food storage over the years needed to bring those food storage and put it into this one supply building where they would actually hand out portions of these supplies to people in that city. They believed that foreign nations were going to come in guns blazing. Satan would take over the world, and it would be a few select groups that would be able to endure this horrible situation. In fact, they were God's people. They were at war against all the evils on this earth. And so, Chad Daybell, Arnold, and several other people within that area believed this with all their heart. And they were trying to convince other people that were like them, people like David Warwick, that they needed to move to this area, where Chad and others like him were gaining control of the area. The more people that they had behind them, the more control of this area they would have. People like Zelima were looking into properties like this, but she wasn't certain she wanted to be there, but she did learn a lot of information about their plans.
Was significant about Rexburg, Idaho?
Chad had said that Rexburg, Idaho was going to be a place of refuge where there was going to be invasions of other countries coming into the United States, and that Rexburg was going to be a place where there would be soldiers and warriors that would be defending that area, and that area had been prepared by the church to accommodate people to come towards that area as a place of safety. Okay.
What did you hear Zelima mention? The church. Either they had a lot of people there supporting what Chad was teaching or selling, that they're able to say that the church supports it, or the church supports it. What it seems like is that area was being infested by all these type of people who were thinking the same way, thinking alike, to prepare for the end days, the second coming, and to build light cities. So remember, at the end of September, September 22nd, Zelima and Alex Cox, they're starting to build this relationship. Chad Daybell told Zelima that she's going to be getting married. It was in August that she received one of her first blessings, that she was going to get married. And they knew who she was going to get married to. They were planning for her to marry Alex Cox. But Zelima said it was September that she received this blessing.
September. He also referred to that. Okay.
So she had a few blessings, guiding her in her life, her path, which direction she was going to take, who she was going to marry, where she was going to live. But if you remember, Zelima claimed that she didn't want to move to Rexburg. So is this a clue as to why Melanie Gibb and David Warwick are at this piece of property this morning? Well, we need to keep that in mind. It's important because there's a structure they're trying to build for this city.
Corey and Chad were teaching that a man and a woman should always be together because they're stronger as an entity than as two separate people. If they are together, then they can have the priesthood together, and they can be stronger and be more effective in whatever it is that they are going to do. So she, once Alex and I started dating, then they started saying that we should be married.
See, here's the problem. Neither Lori or Chad have the financial means at this time to purchase large parcels of property. So it seems there's a big possibility that all of these people that they're associating with, they're just trying to manipulate to help them build this place they believe is going to be a place for them to be safe, to prepare for Jesus Christ coming and for Jesus to reign on the earth. During this time, Alex Cox is building a collection of guns. So we know that they plan to have a military type operation happening on this property once it's built. So John Pryor questioned Ron Arnold, the real estate guy, where they state that they're at church. So it's very confusing. Either they're at church or not at church. But Arnold gives you a hint that they show up at church and that they have these meetings for leaders. So this is interesting.
Well, it's a 2-hour block, but there's meetings for leaders before, and then there's some things to do after church.
Right. So it can encompass 3, maybe even 4 hours sometimes.
Correct.
So on that particular day, although you may not have a specific recollection, Chad could have been there just before 12 o'clock that day. Would that be fair?
I can't remember, to be frank with you, what time we was meeting, because we switch every year. Our meeting times switch every year.
But it does run late into the morning, right?
Yes.
So that wouldn't have given Chad an opportunity on a Sunday to leave and meet with anybody else prior to you picking Chad up at his house on the 21st, right?
I was not with Chad eye-to-eye contact the whole time at church, before or during or even after.
Okay, but when you picked up Chad at his house, he was still in his church clothes, wasn't he?
He was in a white shirt and dress pants, but no tie.
Okay, but that wouldn't be unusual for what he would wear to go to church, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then at that point, you picked him up and you drove out to a piece of property that you were trying to market. Would that be fair?
Yes, which was basically less than 2 minutes from Chad's home.
Right, and I appreciate you telling me that. And at this point, Chad mentioned to you and a guy by the name of Keith about looking at that property. What was that connection with the property and a Keith?
Keith had been somebody that I had been talking to about trying to help him find either a home or a piece of property that he could purchase and build a home on.
Okay, and then that particular piece of property is something that Keith was interested in prior to you going out there with these other folks. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. But then at some point, Chad contacted you and said he has someone who has expressed some interest in buying or at least purchasing some property in the area. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And then when you drove out to that property with Chad after church, did you visit any other properties?
No. I had tried to get Chad to wait till Monday, and he had indicated that they were only going to, the people that were coming to look at it were only going to be there Sunday, and it would only, we really needed to do that. So he pressed that. And so I reluctantly agreed to go show that property. And it was actually in the afternoon.
Okay.
It was after 12 p.m.
It was later in the afternoon.
It was a little later in the afternoon.
So maybe church and all of the obligations with church may have run a little later.
I had been at home. Well, I had been at home when he called and says,
okay.
Will you come and show this property?
Okay. And at that point, when you showed up, there were several people there. Is that right?
The only person there was when I arrived was, and I learned this later, was Alex.
Right.
And then while we were there briefly, and David and Melanie showed up.
Okay. So from what I understand then, it's your testimony that this person, Alex, showed up first when you arrived with Chad.
According to Arnold's testimony, he said that they spent about 15 minutes looking at the property. We heard him mention that this is after 12 o'clock, after church. And so Alex Cox is there. JJ's not there. Lori's not there. So Lori is with JJ during this time. According to David and Melanie, they followed Alex Cox to this piece of property and make plans to do a podcast later that evening and then leave early Monday morning. So a concerning part to the story is supposedly David made an agreement to have either breakfast or lunch at Gringo's on Monday. But that's never been established. But if it were, that would kind of make you wonder what time David and Melanie left. We know that several of them wanted to wait until Monday instead of Sunday to look at that 79 acres, which they were selling for $700K. But according to Chad and his attorney, they were pushing the fact that they did meet at Gringo's the next day for dinner. We also heard that there was a possibility that they met with Keith Levick and his wife Suzanne with Arnold. You gotta remember that Keith Levick is a close friend to Julie Rowe. The problem is in the Chad Daybell trial, we do not hear this side. They're either lying because they said Melanie Gibb and David Warwick were worried that Keith Lubbock is going to tell Julie Rowe that they were there. What is the big deal about that? I don't know. Perhaps it was the property where they were looking at the terrestrial buildings that could have happened before they met at this property. So that was near the church in a park. They see 2-story buildings made of arches and stone. At least Lori and Chad do, because Chad and Melanie said they didn't see anything.
When you got to the park, what happened? We just walked around the park and they described the building. What did they describe? About a 2-story building made of stone, and that's about all I can recall.
You don't recall any specifics about the significance of the building or anything like that?
I don't.
Could you see a building the same place they were saying it was located?
No.
What did you see?
A beautiful park.
Did you perceive in any way, through your own observation, whether or not you thought Chad and Lori thought this building was there?
No.
No, you didn't perceive it?
No, I didn't perceive that. I didn't perceive that they were seeing the building. Is that what you mean?
That's my question, yes.
I'm sorry.
In this testimony, you could see where David was trying to use his gift of knowledge, of knowing things from God, to say, I could not witness this because, I didn't see it. So therefore, it's probably not true. But he also insinuated that he couldn't feel anything was there either.
Sir, could you tell if Chad and Lori thought the building was there?
They talked like they did, but I didn't feel any truth in it.
David believes that they bring him there in order to be a witness to what they see. Now remember, this is probably before they went to that property, I guess. Lori was there at where they're trying to look at these terrestrial buildings that aren't really there. Then, when they're at the second property, 79 acres, Lori isn't there, Alex is. How are they able to switch out that quickly? Where is JJ? Though Chad doesn't live that far from Lori's townhome, I just don't understand how they have all this time to do all this switching out, especially when they got started late that morning. We know around 10:40 that Melanie and David were not downstairs. It's somewhere in between probably 10:50 to a little after 12 or sometime after 12 that they are doing, you have Lori showing up to a property, then you have Alex Cox showing up to a property, and then trying to figure out where JJ is. It's very important to know the timeline in this part, and I'm still working on this timeline, but I'm running out of time because I've caught up to the series now. So now I'm kind of struggling to get the series out. It's from this point on that JJ is not around very much. But we're not getting clear answers as to where JJ is. And it seems that Melanie and David cannot account for JJ except for one other time on September 22nd of 2019, which we will go into on the next part of the series. Remember, JJ had been acting like a zombie that morning, and Alex Cox got JJ and took him supposedly to his apartment. And then right now you're seeing Lori and Alex here and there, not that far apart from one another as far as we can tell. But there's no JJ. Before we go, guys, I want to say thank you so much for your support. Thank you for the likes. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for subscribing. And thank you so much for those of you that share our missing girls. You know, it's really sad to see that some of these stories are going into 6 years now, where their families have no idea what happened to their loved one, their child, and are they going to ever find out? So please, guys, take a moment if you haven't subscribed to subscribe. It means very much to me. I would certainly appreciate it. Share one of our girls on your social media today. And guys, I hope to have the next series up in just a few days. Maybe just audio, but it will be up. Love you guys. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.